Hi, I'm Jennifer Allen reporting for RSNA News. I'm talking with Dr. Tobias Heye from the Department of Radiology at University Hospital Basel in Switzerland. We're talking about his radiology study looking at imaging equipment's energy use and radiology's overall impact on the environment. Thank you, Dr. Heye, for joining me today. What prompted you to study imaging equipment's energy use, and what were the results of your research?
Well, around that time, there was a lot of talk about energy efficiency of certain items, for instance, cars, where you get like the typical gas mileage, what you get out of a tank of gas. And we were wondering if we could apply that concept to radiology. We would look at different scanners, modalities, and find out where are we at in terms of energy use and energy efficiency for our scanners. And that's when we set up to investigate a full year 2015. And we started measuring, continuously measuring over the entire year what I think 3 CTs and 4 MRIs consume in terms of energy. And to understand that, when we separate it into CT, MRI, and maybe the cooling system that we also looked at, is first, what is the scanner doing at a certain time? So you have, during the system on state, we looked at the actual scanning time or segment where the scanner really is doing its work and acquiring images. That is the actual scanning time. Then we considered another segment, which is the patient room time. So that's basically when the patient is in the room and on the scanning table and doing something with the scanner, either being the reconstructions being done for CT, but the patient is in the room. So that's also kind of an active time. And then there's, of course, the idle time. This is the time where the scanner is on, fully on, but there's no activity whatsoever. There's no patient in the room. There's no scanning being performed. And on the other hand, there's the system off. If you shut down your scanner, it's considered the system off time. And we applied the concept to CT and MRI and looked at what is the distribution of the energy use during those different states that a scanner can be in. And surprisingly, if you look at the distribution, a CT scanner may only spend like 4% of its actual, of the entire time that we measured on its being there, 4% is spent for actual scanning. So that's where it's the core productive time is just 4%. If we expand that and include the patient room time, it's still just 27% of the entire time that we have actually some sort of productive state. And conversely, it's 2/3 of the energy consumption goes into a non-productive idle state. And that has to do that a CT scanner has a certain base level of energy consumption that's always there. And the actual scanning is just a very sharp, very tall peak that comes down really quickly. And the area under that curve is actually very small. So the energy spent during these couple of seconds that a CT scanner scans is not that much compared to the sum of all the base level consumption. And there's the key for a CT scanner being efficient. If we somehow could reduce this constantly being in a ready to scan mode to a maybe lesser energy level, then you would have tremendous possibilities to reduce energy use and being much more efficient. So CT scanner per se is quite energy inefficient. And if you just, in a household number would be, if you take one scanner, operating one scanner is equivalent to 5 4-person households in Switzerland. That's quite a lot, I think. Interestingly, if you look at MRI is actually on another level. It's a magnitude higher in terms of energy consumption. Since an MRI scan, the examination is longer and the scanner is constantly scanning, there's less idle time in between. So it's only between 5 and 13%, and it's during where you change patients on the table on the scanner. That, of course, is a necessary idle time. But if you look at where the scanner consumes energy and it's not productive, it's surprisingly in the system off state. And the system off state is the scanner shut down, but since there's need for constant helium cooling and the cooling head needs to be operated, that consumes energy. And in total, that's 1/3 of the total energy consumption just for that operation. And that if we take the total energy consumption of the MRI, we are at 26 4-person households, which is of course quite a lot. And it's just one MRI scanner. You can do the numbers for your department and add up all the numbers there. The absolute numbers that we found may differ for your institution, how you run how you operate your scanners, but the proportional values, they wouldn't change that much. And interestingly enough, even if you add up CT and MRI energy consumption, there's another player, which is the cooling system. Especially for MRI, you need cooling systems. MRI is quite demanding in that. And out of the total energy consumption we found for operating CT, MRI, and the cooling system makes up 44.5%, which is almost half of that. So what's happening there is that we create heat, which is one form of energy, and then we create another form of energy, which is cold or cooling, and we need to counteract that. And this is problematic in a way that we kind of zero out energy and we don't conserve energy there. So there would be a huge potential again to conserve energy or use that heat in other ways, in other applications, maybe in the hospital. Then we put that all together, we added up the numbers, and you come up with like 852 people living in a small town, which is equivalent to our setup with 3 CTs and 4 MRIs, the energy consumption. And overall, if we look at what just this little fleet of scanners is around 4% of our annual hospital energy consumption. And it's a conservative measure. If you put in more, the entire department would make up much more, but just these 7 scanners, and it's quite a large number, I think. So these are basically the results that we found. And in summary, there's a lot of room for using that inefficient energy consumption for first of conserving it and or using the energy in different ways.
So how can radiology departments be more mindful of their energy consumption?
Well, first off, a very simple idea is just to turn off the scanners. If you are not doing that already, shutting down a CT scanner during off hours can easily reduce power consumption by 1/3 or 50%. And we learned from our vendor that is actually not common practice to shut down CT scanners or MRI scanners. So this constant being ready to scan mode requires a certain amount of energy, and just shutting it down would help. Compacting your schedule could help a little bit, but apart from that, we need support from vendors. We need applications from vendors that help us in reducing the energy consumption.
So speaking of vendors, do you envision that imaging equipment vendors will be an ally in the need to create future imaging equipment that consumes less energy?
Well, I sure hope so. There's tremendous opportunities for using that also as a marketing opportunity, because in the end you also save money. When you save energy, you don't have to pay such a large electricity bill. But I'm a bit hesitant because there's, of course, in the market, there's always far better scanning. These are the parameters that they show us where they market their scanners, but not so much how energy efficient they are. But I would assume that if there's the first vendor who comes out and says, look, we do just the same as before, we scan and provide really nice images, but we have 30% or let's say 10, 15% we are more energy efficient, then you have a benefit compared to the other competitors out there. And there are certainly countries where the availability for electricity is and the constant availability, that's what we learned also, is more of an issue. So if you offer systems like that, you have an advantage. And I think that maybe is the leverage there that can open up this idea for the vendors.
So as radiology departments shift to be more aware of their impact on the environment, will patients see any difference in their care or safety?
Well, that should not be the case, because we don't change anything in how we scan. So when we scan, we use the same amount of energy. What we think needs to be addressed is exactly the energy that's non-productively spent. And that is where there's no patient in the room, basically. And that shouldn't affect the scanners or the scanning procedure at all.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Doctor.
You're welcome. Thank you.
For more radiology news, visit rsna.org/news.